Alright everybody, thank you very much for coming. So today we're going to explain and show you how the reading and vocabulary course in Moodle works. The overview for today's session is as follows. We'll start with a bit of pedagogical underpinning, then I'm going to give you a little tour of the various activities that are part of this course. There will be a practical activity where you yourself are going to have a go at the speed readings. We're going to talk about the vocabulary testing, which we typically do at the beginning of semester 1 and at the end of semester 2, and we can take any of your questions at the end. You should all have 2 sheets of paper. One is this progress graph, and that relates to the speed reading activity, and the other document, the reading and vocabulary course note-taking sheet, so you can scribble some notes onto here if you wish. Ideally, you should all have a laptop. I see that a few of you haven't. You've got your smartphones. I'm not 100% sure if it will work on a smartphone, but we can try it. If not, you can always observe somebody who's got a laptop and see how it all works on theirs. So, to start things off, Lawrence will just go through a bit of the pedagogical underpinnings and background to this course.
Okay, so the course involves translation with the word cards, which was often frowned upon by people with no knowledge or very low evidence. Translation is actually the quickest way to get a meaning of a word, a core meaning, and there's ample evidence, hundreds of studies showing that it works really, really well. I'll explain how it works in a minute, a little bit later, but the translation is in the vocabulary exercises on Moodle, as you'll see later. We use the VST, vocabulary size test, to test vocabulary size, as the name suggests. We use that one because what we're interested in is breadth of receptive vocabulary. There are lots of other tests, but they all do different things. This one tests breadth of receptive vocabulary, form, meaning, link. That's all it tests. And to read, what you actually need is the form, meaning, link to get the core meaning. So that's why we use the VST. We also use the AWL test, which does the same thing, form, meaning, link of the academic word list. Academic word lists included because it has a very, very good surrender value. By that I mean that there's 370 words, but those 370 words cover about 11% of any academic text. So that's a massive return for a very small amount of words. We test that because if you get a student at the beginning who's only got perhaps about a 60% score on that, they're going to struggle. And we need to do something about it quickly, which is linking it to the activities that Craig will show you later. Similar thing with the vocabulary size. There's very, very hard evidence that if you've got fewer than 10,000 word vocabulary in English, it won't be particularly easy for you. If you've got between 6 and 10, you might struggle through, but the workload for a student will rise massively, the amount of time they have to spend on their reading. So we're looking for students typically below 7,000 or 8,000 to do something about them quite early. If you find any students who've got about 4,000 words, they're in trouble, and you can almost forecast that they won't complete an undergraduate course in English. So 10,000 makes it easy for them, and then it starts getting progressively more difficult the lower you get. The way they learn vocabulary through translation is through word cards, and they're online now. The reason they use word cards rather than word lists is because of retrieval. So just imagine if you've got a word list, we'll do this 2 ways actually. You've got a word list and you can see the English and the Russian or Kazakh translation. Do you you have to make any mental effort to see that meaning?
No, if you've got them both on the
No,
page.
They're both in front of you,
Yeah.
no mental effort. However, if you put the same two words on a card, and the English is on one side and the Russian's on the other, do you have to make a mental effort to retrieve the meaning?
Small amount,
Not quite a large amount, actually. You get a partial meaning, but you have to retrieve the meaning. It's not telling you. Every time you retrieve a meaning, it makes stronger memory links, and it leads to automaticity, eventually, after about 20 or 30 meetings with it. It's only for form meaning link, that part. And the retrieval effect is the key thing. Retrieval's from psychology and psycholinguistics. Again, massive evidence in countless studies that it works very, very well. All the things we're talking about now are evidence-based. That's in contrast to things a lot of us grew up with, like Stephen Krashen, you probably know that you get vocabulary from reading. You don't, or you get tiny, tiny amounts from reading. Very tiny. It would take you about 200 years, which unfortunately most of us haven't got, to build a vocabulary that way. So that's why we do this. The speed reading course is in there because students have to learn at university to read expeditiously. Just means reading for particular things very quickly, and they typically have to read long journal articles. And what they're not good at in the second language is reading quickly. Yeah, so the speed reading is to get them into the habit of reading quickly by providing texts that are very, very easy for them, and you're going to do it in a little while, and they just read as quickly as they can to get quicker every time. That won't solve the problem totally, but it leads there. And there are other things later that we'll add to that. We also want to build depth of vocabulary after they've got their first core meanings, form meaning link. And we do that by graded readers. So every time we measure their vocabulary, we get them to read texts that are at or below their vocabulary level. So, if your vocabulary is at a 5,000 word level, and you read a text that doesn't contain any words above that level, when you read it, then you will start to build depth in context, because you'll understand all the words. You're not stopping to get the core meaning. You can read it, but you see how it works with other English. You with me? Yeah. Okay, that's very, very important as well.
So sorry, when you said every time we measure, but I mean on this course, for example, we don't do it once at the beginning, we don't do
Well,
it.
you can do it more if you want, but you're measuring at the beginning, so you know the student's got 5,000 or 6,000 words, so you can keep giving them text at that level or below, and then they'll build depth of that vocabulary.
Yeah, but my point is, as opposed to, perhaps it is optional to later on do it, and if they get a better score, then move them up.
Yeah.
The graded reading.
Yeah. So that's to build the depth of it. I think that's all I wanted to say, is it? Yeah. Have you got any questions? You can ask any questions about this bit.
So the listening and the writing, what does that?
Add in the thing, the listening as a phonological loop, which aids. And for Kazakhs, probably works well. The listening works very well for some language groups. Yeah, Kazakh's probably one. And you get a different link. So it's not the form meaning, it's the sound.
But without them understanding the meaning of the word.
Well, they will understand the meaning of the word.
So they'll have to do it in sequence.
They do, but when they listen and write is one of them.
Yeah, but the word itself, they might not know the meaning.
No, they do the first one, the form meaning link, and then they do the other two. The listen and write is the spelling, and that's pretty useful for Russian ones because they've got a different alphabet. Yeah, it's very useful for Arabs, for example, because because they've got completely different spelling. So it's important to get all three of them. The first one you do on the cards is the form meaning, then you build up with the others.
I'm going to take you through different activities and exercises today, but he'd be the person to give you a little bit more insight into anything pedagogical. So I'll just give you a really quick tour of this. So, as Lawrence mentioned, this is largely based on the AWL, or the Academic Word List. I think he said it was comprised of 370 words. It's actually 570. Developed by Avril Coxhead, a fellow Kiwi, in the 2000.
And one of my main master's lecturers.
Oh wow, even better. So yeah, the AWL, I'm sure you already know, is comprised of 10 sublists, and within each of those sublists you have 60 words, except sublist 10, which is 30 words. And so what we're trying to do with these activities, as Lawrence has really gone through already, is to expose students to these words, to this vocabulary, so that they can grasp meaning. And here are the different activities that students can get involved in. And these are in a particular sequence. So we start with AWL Read and Translate. Actually, let me just backpedal a second. All of these activities here, we encourage our students to do in their free time. We're not going to be checking up on whether they're doing listen and write or listen and translate. They're not mandatory, but we are encouraging students to do this. And particularly if we identify any students who have a low vocabulary range when we do the vocabulary size test at the beginning, we should be encouraging students to get more involved in these. The one that we do expect you to do, that is mandatory, I believe, is the speed reading, or reading fluency. And the idea behind that is, as Lawrence briefly mentioned, is that students will be reading a fairly easy, accessible piece of text, and they have to time themselves. And if you look up on your desk, you've got a progress graph there with words per minute. And the idea is that each time they do the reading, they make a note of their words per minute or their timing. They answer the questions. There are 10 questions for each of the readings, and they can't go back to the text. And it basically tests their reading fluency, which is basically understanding what they've read and yet increasing their speed. Now, we used to do that plus vocabulary cards in the classroom. We did that for several years, but we're trying to find ways of utilising technology to take it out of the classroom so we've got more time in the class to do other things. So, I'll just go through some of these activities with you. So the first one is AWL Read and Translate. So we've got the instructions just here for the students. Notice also we've added a little click here button which will give them the same instructions, but it'll open it in another tab, and they just need to separate that. Now the reason behind that is that when they're doing this activity here, if they forget for some reason what the instructions are, they don't need to go back, they'll have another window with those instructions laid out for them. So as you can see, we've got sublist 1, set 1, set 2, set 3, so there's 20 words in each of those, right down to sublist 10. As I mentioned, sublist 10 is the exception. All of the sublists except this one have 60 words. Sublist 10 has 30 words, so we've divided it into 2 sets of 10. So I'll just give you a quick idea of what it looks like. So in this case, the Russian spelling is at the top, and then they have to choose the correct word until they've answered all of them. Finish attempt. So this is what the students will see. Submit all and finish. Yep. Let's see how I did. 2.5. So that's the read and translate. Let's just come out of that. We'll go into another one. As I say, all I'm doing really here is just giving you a quick tour of these. So in the same way, we've got the instructions just here. Students can open them in a separate window through that link there. So we're testing the receptive skills here, so they practice reading. Now they can practice listening. Okay, so in this one, they play each of these. Function. Recognise that, please?
Identify. labour.
Students press play and they have to choose the correct translation from here. And again, at the very bottom, it'll say finish attempt, submit and finish, and it'll give them their score. In terms of listen and write, so this time, exactly that. So listen to the word and write what you hear.
Analysis.
Okay, you can do this one.
Approach.
Then we've got the speed readings. Now this is where we need to pay a bit more attention, and you're going to get involved in this too. So just first of all, as I mentioned, you've all got that progress graph on your desk. What's going to happen is the students read the text, the stopwatch will begin as soon as they start reading. Once they've finished reading the text, they have to stop the stopwatch. Make a note of their time. Then they go to the next screen where they'll be presented with 10 questions, which will test what they've understood. They answer those questions. I believe if they get 8 or more, so 8, 9 or 10, that means they've passed that activity. But if they get lower than 8, they'll be told to do it again, and it will be available 2 hours later. All right?
Are all those instructions on Moodle?
They're all here, yeah. One final thing just to mention before I move on is that with these speed readings or reading fluency, students will have good weeks and bad weeks. You will notice it's not going to be continuously upwards. There should be an overall upward trajectory from the start of semester 1 to the end of semester 2, but they're going to have weeks where they're extremely tired, they're overloaded. There may be other factors as well which kind of play into their ability to understand what they're reading and to do it to their best ability. So we need to factor those things into. Okay, so that's speed reading. We also have some AWL reading lessons as well that students can have a go at, and all of those reading lessons come complete with answers as well, so they can go through these. We've only got, I think there are some missing, unfortunately, 7, 9 and 10, but that is something that we are working on. So if you've got some super keen students, they can do those lessons. There are graded readers as well, so this is reading for pleasure or extensive reading. These are short texts based on your vocabulary size, so if the student knows, for example, that they're 5,500 words, they should read from the full 1,000-word text. And then finally at the bottom here, we've got some some vocabulary and writing resources. The one that I'm more familiar with is the Lex Tutor program. So if, for example, you want students to understand how a particular collocation works, they can search through these concordances. The one that I usually recommend is the British National Corpus Written, I believe it is. So I don't know. Somebody give me a collocation, anything at all?
Significant trouble.
Significant trouble.
Significant difficulty.
Okay. Someone else?
Significant issue.
That didn't work.
Significant findings.
Significant findings, significant issue, significant difficulty.
Okay, let's just try significant. Don't let me down. Oh, dear. I'm going to have to do some video editing, I think. Let's go back. Right, okay, so just a second. So this one here. B and C written. Significant. Get concordance. That's a little bit better. Okay. So if students want to see how words connect with prepositions, in other words, they can use a concordancer. So perhaps there may be academic word list words that they want to see exactly, particularly verbs, how exactly they work. This is a good place to suggest. That's it, thank you.